Hello, I'm Mark Perry, and I'm a professor at the University of Santiago de Chile, where I teach in the teacher training program. And primarily, I teach about methodologies for English for specific purposes. And that's what I'm going to talk about with you today. I'm going to give you an introduction to ESP, and then I'm going to give you a couple of teacher strategies that have helped me in my classes and hopefully will be useful for you. First, what is ESP? Well, ESP stands for English for Specific Purposes. And it is, I would like to define it as English language instruction that has distinctive goals, and it is just for a limited group of students. And when I first started teaching here, about 15 years ago, when I first started teaching ESP, I noticed that my colleagues who had been teaching it previously tended to focus on vocabulary, but ESP is much, much more than vocabulary for students, as we hopefully will see. And ESP has been a part of English language instruction since the 1950s, and it's a growing part of what I like to call EFL, English as a foreign language. In the United States, we might say ESL, English as a second language, jargon. And I have a list of, there they are, abbreviations and acronyms. Now, we know what a difference between an abbreviation and an acronym is. An abbreviation is merely the letters. For example, ESP is an abbreviation, and it stands for English for Specific Purposes. An acronym would be something like, moving down the list, TOEFL. TOEFL, Test of English as a Foreign Language. That's an acronym. So an acronym is one that we sound out. So I have a list here of just a few of the abbreviations and acronyms that we have to confront constantly in our daily lives as teachers of English. And you'll notice that I have CBI, content-based instruction, international English teaching, and then getting down to some more English for specific purposes areas, English for academic purposes, there's English for business purposes, English for occupational purposes, English for professional purposes, English for science and technology. I believe that looking back at the history of ESP, originally, ESP was English for Science and Technology, and then it evolved into the more general English for Specific Purposes. And I'm sure that in your experience in English, that you can come up with a lot more abbreviations and acronyms that we fit in. Okay, moving along. I like to, when I teach my students ESP, and introduction for ESP specifically, I like to talk about how English for specific purposes differs from teaching general English, or EGP, yes, English for general purposes. See, we get a lot of these acronyms and abbreviations. English, the ESP practitioner, like a general English practitioner, and notice I'm using practitioner and not teacher because in the definition we'll see. An ESP practitioner is, just like the general English practitioner, a teacher. Okay, they use similar methods, but there are some very distinct and important differences between an ESP practitioner and a general English practitioner. What are those differences? Well, first, the ESP practitioner has very specific goals, a very limited area of goals. For example, you might have a class full of secretaries, and you would be limited in needing to teach them perhaps how to answer the phone or how to write reports. If you have English for business purposes, you might have executives, and you need to teach them a limited area preparing papers or reports or giving presentations. Technicians might need to learn how to read diagrams or instructional materials. So you have a very limited area there, much more so than the general English teacher. Also, the ESP practitioner has to be able to, in many cases, in most cases actually, the ESP practitioner designs the course. They have to plan it. They have to adapt and write core materials. This, for me, as an ESP teacher, is probably the most demanding area, adapting and writing core materials, because there just aren't a lot of textbooks out there that are designed for the specific needs, going back to the earlier item, going back to the specific needs. There aren't a lot of textbooks that meet those specialized needs that you have for each individual group of students when you're an ESP practitioner. Also, as well, you need to create your own tests, and you will be analyzing, doing a little research on language, genre, and discourse. Now, a general English teacher does a little bit of those things, but for them, I think, my personal opinion is that for a general English practitioner, it's a little bit easier when it comes to planning and materials and tests, because for the most part, you've got a textbook that you're using. And in ESP, there are some very useful textbooks out there, but again, you're going to have specific groups of students that are going to have specific goals that you're going to have to adapt a lot of material to. Another way that an ESP practitioner differs from a general English practitioner is that they deal directly with their clients. Now, of course, general English teachers deal with students and they have administrators, but with an ESP practitioner, your students are largely adults. I don't think there are many ESP courses that are being given to elementary school students. Probably there are in vocational schools, and for tercero medio and cuarto medio, there could be vocational students taking ESP courses. So you're getting a little bit older group. So there are adult students, you have administrators, and these have been termed stakeholders. And it's a little bit different from a general English setting in that these stakeholders are involved directly in funding. The students are usually paying for the course, and the administrators or the institution itself is paying for the course. So they have their own very specific requirements that are different from what the general English teacher will face in just teaching in, let's say, a high school or colegio, if you will. And also there's a big difference in student motivation. And this is something that the ESP practitioner needs to be very aware of, that the students need to be motivated, and the students will have distinct needs and desires. And in my classes at the University of Santiago, we talk a lot about needs versus desires, and they are different. Needs are things that are required, and desires are things that students want to happen. And really, they're distinct, but both of them really have to be met for there to be a successful course. And so ESP practitioners really need to worry about those things in a way that general English teachers don't. Now, the last two areas here are something that really, I think, separates the ESP teacher, trainer, practitioner from the general English, and that is that the ESP person trains and teaches students. Now, there's a difference. If you think about it a little bit, there's a slight difference between training and teaching. A trainer helps prepare students or their pupils or whatever. Let's say a football trainer. He doesn't actually get out on the field and participate in the game. He prepares the football player to go out and play in the game. He helps assist the football player to attain their potential when they're out in the game. That's exactly what an ESP trainer does. They train students